Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 15 in the book of James. We're going to talk about wisdom today. We're in the last paragraph of chapter 3 of the book of James. Now, remember, I'm going to recall a little picture I gave before about traffic in Nairobi, Kenya, where it moved with meekness. That is, it moved with preference, where one driver would basically say to another, no, after you go first. And the whole process, which should have been, horrible and chaotic, turned out to be just a real delight. And that is kind of the picture I'm going to leave at the end of today about giving preference to wisdom. That when you give preference to wisdom, it results in good conduct being displayed. In fact, we're going to go through a list of like the fruits of wisdom as opposed to the fruits of being unwise. In short, that's vile and disorder. And so this good conduct that comes from wisdom, or especially from giving preference to wisdom. So there's an action that we have before you get wisdom, which is to make a space for it. Okay, so listen in here. This is wisdom from above, James chapter 3, verse 13. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. That's the preference part. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. Yikes. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, again, jealousy and selfish ambition, there will be disorder in every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So the passage here is pointing to the fruits of wisdom. So on one hand, you get purity, peaceability, gentleness, open to reason, full of mercy, good fruits. In other words, you get good conduct at the end of it. And compare and contrast another one where you end up with vile practice and disorder. So the bottom line is you should make room for wisdom. That is, make a space for it, make a place for it, kind of like the Nairobi traffic. That is, to give a preference for it, as opposed to, so there's other things we could give preference to. So we could give preference to our earthly jealousies. And James is saying, don't do that. We could make preference for our ambition. Have that be job number one, is my ambition. He says, don't do that. Or maybe you're going through something, how about weariness? Is weariness a good thing to make as a primary preference? No. So he's elevating heavenly wisdom that comes from above, that is spiritual, that is godly, and as it is applied, it results in a list that is pretty impressive. Before I go through that impressive list, let me talk about the contrast. So there's really two different categories here. There's a contrast of a heavenly wisdom and an earthly wisdom. Let me talk about the earthly wisdom first. It's from below. It's unspiritual. It's demonic. It's sourced in jealousy. It's sourced in selfish ambition. And the result is a vile practice. So James is all about behavior. And if you start with this earthly so-called wisdom or earthly thoughts of wisdom, you don't even want to use the same descriptor for it, the vile practice, and it results in disorder. And he even says that a heavenly wisdom results in an impartiality. Now, remember, James has already gone through in chapter 2. He's gone kind of off on his readers and say, don't be bad discriminators. Don't show partiality. That is, discriminating poorly versus preferentially giving discernment and wisdom, and this will lead to wrong behavior. The wrong behavior towards people demonstrates that you have the wrong thinking about people. The wrong thinking about people is because you have the wrong view of God's activity. And the reason you have the wrong view of God's activity, and this is at its core, is you have the wrong view of God's character and who God is at the beginning. So that's how you end up being partial and discriminating poorly, as opposed to being partial to wisdom and discriminating positively or preferentially towards our brothers and sisters who may not be exactly like us. All right, let's talk about the heavenly wisdom. Heavenly wisdom here is from above. It is godly. That is, it demonstrates characteristics of God, and it is spiritual. And here's what it results in. Think about this. This is like a Galatians 2:22 about the fruits of the Spirit. This is the fruit of wisdom. This is verse 17. But the wisdom from above is first pure, peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. So it's pure, it's peaceable, it's unifying amongst warring factions. It's gentle, which is kind of the only way that voices are ever heard, I think, is in gentleness. It's open to reason. It has the brain and heart where they're humble and open for business. It's full of mercy. How can we not be full of mercy towards our brothers and sisters if we're not aware of the dose of mercy that God has given us? He's demonstrated it first. And it shows good fruits as opposed to this vile practice. So the bottom line here is we are to be making room for wisdom. We're to be making a space for it. We're to yield to wisdom preferentially. We're tempted and crowded into that same space might be jealousy and ambition and other bad motivations, but we have to push those things out and push into it the meekness of wisdom, which is us saying to wisdom and to the Lord, no, after you go first. Wisdom has consequences in behavior and has fruits, as so does earthly wisdom, or earthly non-wisdom, as it were. So let's demonstrate those characteristics. And how do we get there? Mostly, I think, at least by today's passage, is by giving preference to wisdom. Let's do that today. Pin that on your chest. I'll see you today. See you tomorrow.